So, welcome to Dual Podcast Empire Profits, and this is an on-air workspace session series. And I am Majesty AliNICOLE WOW, and I am here again with the wonderful Queen Brenda Lynn, again, who is one of my Star Celebrity-preneurs, and we've been doing this series in terms of being able to demonstrate the benefits of having a solo and guest featured podcast for business. And Brenda Lynn is in the Workspace hot seat session here, where we're going to be working on the development of her new Podcasting for Business initiative. So, Brenda Lynn, thank you for being back.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm excited to go through this journey. I always enjoy these workspace sessions with you. I never know what to expect.
Well, I always enjoy them with you when we work on a variety of different levels of topics and focuses, for business and leadership, and being able to use podcasting as a vehicle of business expression, business communication is vital, especially during this era. And even though podcasting has been around for, quite some time, I mean, I've been in the podcasting industry for over a decade, and I've done multi-levels of podcasting. And I know for business that you have to be very, very intentional. And over the years, I've seen where others have started podcasts and they wanted it to be for their business, but they didn't actually know how to actually build effectively for that. So they just jumped into podcasting and saying, yes, I'm going to leverage this and showcase my business. And then they find out, it works a little bit different, than that. So
one great business is for your guests, but not so much for yourself.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And so that is the reason why this particular focus is very vital. And of course, you've had the opportunity to listen to the training, which, listening audience, I will be having a link to the Dual Podcast Empire Profits. I'll have that training link in the description so that you can listen to that. Brenda Lynn has listened to it, and as she shared in the last segment, what her takeaways were from that particular training and what she's excited to move forward with, from listening to that. And so you have the opportunity to go through it as well and start to, yes, embark on this initiative. So we're doing this workspace session so that you can get the benefits, of course, of being able to participate in Brenda Lynn's journey, and that you'll gain the wisdom and knowledge for yourself, how you can best start moving forward with this initiative. And also, as we're developing this, then you will get to also subscribe to Brenda Lynn's podcast. So yes, absolutely. So we left off with talking about the type of podcast that you felt would be in your best interest to start with. And I am definitely going to say that that is actually the best way to jumpstart your success for this initiative, for sure. And so benefits of you having this type of podcast for business building, brand building, which brand building is what we're going to talk about in this segment, because a lot of times what people fail to realize is that you have to also have a branding that for your business that will work for podcasting. Your branding in your business that works for your business may not actually translate over into the podcasting initiative. So there's things that go into this, and I have an article that I will link in the description about, do you actually have a brand that will work for podcasting for business? See, a lot of people don't even think about that. They don't. Yeah. So
absolutely. Good question to start out with, for sure.
Great. And I will make sure, Brenda Lynn, that is going to be also part of your assignment, to be able to read that, because even though we're going to be working on this, today, but this is a building process. So you don't necessarily have to wait to have everything in order before you start your podcast. It's just that education around this particular experience is important. But I do recommend people, yes, go ahead and get started for sure. But there are some branding factors that you have to consider when you are wanting to leverage this for business. And you can start off initially just even using your name as the podcast, because that I feel is an easier way if it's kind of, a show that is focused on what your unique expression is, then you don't have to worry so much, is this going to work for business in terms of, because it will be how you're showing up. But that's something we'll talk about. But Brenda Lynn, what are your thoughts around that before we jump into some of the workspace?
You brought up a good point that I hadn't considered was, and right out the chute, was how to title the podcast. And I would have to give some thought. My company is fairly recognizable. It kind of states precisely what I want to accomplish in the podcast, being awakening consciously. So any kind of activities, wisdom that people can gain to help them move forward into this new world. So is that more recognizable? Is that more beneficial than using my name, which is getting out there as well? So
okay, so I can speak to both because and I'm sure that as time progresses, you'll probably have a more multi-layered podcasting initiative, which I talk about in the training, different ways that you can set up some podcast platforms that are specifically focused, and maybe it's just a series that you do on that podcast, or you only upload segments so often, and leverage the other segments as evergreen throughout, the experience. But when you are trying to position as a brand and to be able to be, I would say, more expansive with what you do, sometimes branding with, if not your full name, your name and an expression, like, like I'm Majesty, of course, but AliNICOLE WOW. So the wow is my wow factor, because my statement, how I show up is I show up as a statement, an expression, and an experience. And so that wow factor comes in multiple levels. So sometimes my branding is, wow, she does it all. Wow, she has it all. Wow, she writes, wow, she speaks and writes it all. There's something typically following the wow. But I do have different podcast platforms that are not name titled. They're very centrally focused. But those particular ones are things I do seasonal. When you are wanting to build more of a brand, and because you, like myself, have a very diverse brand, multi-level, multi-layer, you may not want to just dial in terms of a company. Because remember, like I said, your company, because you have multiple companies.
I do, yes.
And you have multiple products.
Yeah.
So it may be in your best interest to be able to demonstrate the prism of you, which I have trainings and articles around that too, is having a platform where you can showcase the range of your leadership. And
yeah, you're right. I would want to bring all of that wisdom.
Yes,
all of those different projects into a podcast. So that's a really good point.
Yes. And so that's something to, something to think about in terms of, and then also when it comes to guests, you'll be able to have a variety of different guests that you can bring on, and not necessarily tailored to, okay, this specific, niche focus in terms of my company is around this. Because when you're expansive in the way that you are, you have multi-levels of products and you're in business. But the business is not necessarily just in terms of one specific empire. So you can multiply even with one platform of being able to have, I'll use this as an example, how sometimes people have some type of lifestyle, whether it's blog or a lifestyle YouTube channel or so, is that they're focusing more holistically, that can cover a wide range of who they are. And so with you in business, because you're a leader, you have more of an authority in terms of business leadership. and you focus on finance, you focus on the chakra system, you focus on spiritual awakening. You have a lot of different focuses that really pertain to business leaders or pertain to a specific audience for sure, but you want to kind of provide a holistic experience. So another example, just like with your YouTube channel, one of your YouTube channels, Brenda Lynn Leadership, or so that's just about your leadership in general, right? So with the podcast, in terms of starting to brand for the podcast initially, is yes, could you lead with your name, or leading with Brenda Lynn or so, or the Brenda Lynn Show or so. There's a variety. I'm throwing things out there that you can consider, because the way that you brand in terms of with the podcast is not so much just on the name of the podcast, but it's on what is the podcast going to be centrally focused on that will draw a multi-interest, kind of a multi-interest focus to individuals for what you do, for what you do. So, so that's just something. Go ahead.
It's a good point. And I also like something that you said or alluded to, was that, as the way I heard it anyways, was that as the world changes and we move into these higher dimension, higher frequencies, things that I've never even dreamed of teaching will be showing up.
Absolutely.
And may not be encompassed in UEQ or Awakening Consciously, but can come in under the Brenda Lynn title.
Absolutely.
It gives more flexibility for me to maneuver in this new frequency and move in directions that I haven't even dreamed of right now.
Absolutely. And that demonstrates the prism, the prism of you, which obviously is going to be more profitable, because you're not just centrally boxed in. And so let me just say something for those who have been conditioned, in a sense, in terms of focusing on a specific. I'm not saying that you can't still do a podcast in that way, but when you have a branding such as Brenda Lynn's and one like mine that is more multi-interest focused, then a podcast that is going to be more regular and consistent would be more beneficial on something that is more multi-interest focused, where things that we want to dial in on, that works better on a platform that we just, like, I'll give this example, and Brenda Lynn has heard me talk about this, and also in the training. Those of you, when you listen to the training, you'll hear me talk about setting up podcasts on platforms that are, they have a limited amount of time in terms of what you can use for free podcasting. And so you can use those podcasts to create some type of podcast series, or that can be, let's say, an academy an on-air radio academy that you do that leads into something else. And so you just use up the free airtime that they give you to establish that platform for that initiative. So let's say Brenda Lynn, in terms of whether it's Awakening Consciously or it is your UEQ platform or so, if you wanted to have a specific platform for those initiatives or podcasts, doing a podcast platform that has an archive of different renderings that set the foundation up and also showcase and feature certain products would be really good for those types of initiatives. And you could use those as evergreen marketing, where you could still do the same thing within the podcast that you're setting up in terms of the duality, is that you can focus on an empire per segment, just like a product. So if you could, you may come on to say, this particular segment is sponsored by or brought to you by my company, awakeningconsciously.com. Instead of the whole entire podcast being about that, that specific focus. And then if you have a platform, like you have platforms on Tumblr and Blogspot, different platforms, you can say, in this particular segment is, inspired by my company, UEQ.com, UEQ Leadership, or however, or this particular podcast segment is inspired by my publication X, Y, and Z. And I'm going to be talking about this focus from this. I'm going to share a little bit from this particular chapter, and you can secure this resource on Amazon, but I'll have a link below. So, so I'm just mocking it up here for you.
Okay.
So
I'm glad
yeah,
you're recording.
what'd you say?
I'm glad you're recording. I
Good.
can't write this fast.
Yeah. So that's things that you can consider, and the listening audience can consider, that if you're going to do a podcast where you want more flexibility, and here's the deal, you can have a core focus, okay? Because even within the allness of a particular initiative, you can have a core audience and a core focus and still be able to address multiple things. And you can also do series on your podcast platform. So those are good ways, honestly, to start out before you start even incorporating bringing guests in, but then that gives an opportunity to invite guests to come in as well. Brenda Lynn, something to consider too is that if you do certain segments starting out about, let's say, a particular topic or particular focus, you can also bring others in to collaborate in the next season or so on a particular segment, so they can listen to the segment and then be able to, and this is a way for your brand and credibility to keep building too.
Right. I like
It's
that.
where someone else comes in and they have a discussion around that, but they also maybe have an expertise in that too.
Yeah.
And you have a very rich conversation, and both of you can share your resources or so, or you can just mention for them to listen to your podcast segment, and that is on that particular focus. That's kind of like a warm-up in the sense of talking about that, and then you can segue into talking about it with that other person. Now, this is something that, especially when you are having people come on for free, this is how you can do benefits. It benefits you both to have kind of a conversational training, to have a collaborative type of initiative, right?
Right.
And these are just considerations. If someone wants to do a literal interview with you, that's going to take you requiring work to do around X, Y, and Z, then maybe that is something that you charge for, or you just do a short segment with them. But if you do something longer, let it benefit you both. So these are the benefits of having dual podcasts, where again, you have your segments, and then you can bring other people on that collaborate, but then you can also bring other guest features on where you actually are interviewing. That way you can be multifunctional, you can be cross-functional on the platform. You're the brand and authority, but then you also are the host. But then you're also demonstrating that you are a team player. You are a collaborator with conversational trainings. Do you see the multi-levelness of
absolutely.
that? Yeah. And so when someone comes into the Brenda Lynn universe, we just see, where do they fit in, where do they play? And so that's the flexibility with having a podcast that, let's say, is name branded, and or it's a brand expression, because it could be, Brenda Lynn, like, I'll give an example, like my Star Empress Celebrity-preneur, which of course that I actually met you through her, Gina Gardner. Gina has a show that's called Gina Gardner and Friends, and so you can have some of this Brenda Lynn, network, or Brenda Lynn, and or just, if you don't want to do that, because hers is more focused on interviewing others, but when you have something and you're doing it dualistically, you can just have your name, and it could just be, the Brenda Lynn podcast, or leading with Brenda Lynn, or just things that you can think about. So let's explore just initially, in terms of what that could look like, and then how we can start setting up, and I'll talk about maybe a platform that would be best to jumpstart this initiative on. We can look at what a season 1 looks like for you, with you starting, and then maybe bringing on, you know, guests for the next season, or weaving collaboration, conversational, types of dialogue, or co-host, or so we can look at that, leaning in. What are your thoughts around that?
I like that idea. I think that it's a nice way to set a foundation for the experience, and it kind of gives time to build up momentum before introducing other experts into something. So I like the idea of practice making perfect.
Yes.
Podcast practice being on there, practice that, get used to the technology, because often the technology can hijack you. A lot of people that I've been on didn't realize that their Zoom accounts would shut off after 40 minutes and didn't plan around that. So yeah, there's a lot of that technical stuff that you can work out with that slow start. You can build the foundation to it, and then whether it's later in the first season or into a second season that you start introducing experts. I think that will just become intuitive.
Yes, absolutely.
Every company, every project will be different, but I think there'll come a time with people when they come across the perfect person that will add a new dimension to what they're already talking about. And you don't want to say, oh no, I'll put you off to next season, because that's when I interviewees in. It's like, this feels so right. Move forward now. Let's do it.
Absolutely. And you've brought up several things that I want to address. And I want to first talk about a platform that is very easy to use, and you don't actually have to worry in terms of, oh, this is going to shut off on me, or different things like that. So the platform used to be called Anchor. It is now Spotify for podcasters. And people can still find it, Anchor, now on Spotify. That is a very easy platform to use. Also, you can record directly into the podcasting, system. And so that's a way, in terms of like, whenever you're doing your own, features or so, you don't have to worry about the time frame. But now when you are interviewing guests, of course, and you do need another recording device, in a sense, obviously, yes, Zoom is going to be the best one. And you do have to be mindful, as Brenda Lynn said, in terms of timing. If you have a free Zoom account, you can only record for up to 40 minutes, and you don't want to be up to that 40 minutes. You want to be closing that interview out, probably at 30 minutes, I should say, but definitely no later than 35. You don't want to be rushing to, have to close that out. I do know what that's like. That's not, the funnest way to be able to do that. So if you don't have a premium account with Zoom, having the free one, again, that allows you 40 minutes, plan for that, and then you can do the recordings. And Spotify allows you to do the video, but since Zoom gives you the opportunity to have the M4A, which is like an MP3, the audio version, that's the one that you really want to use in this platform. They also have transitions and music, royalty-free music, that you can add, to the beginning and the end, the intro and outro. So those are things to consider. So again, Spotify for podcasters, or you can look up Anchor now on Spotify, and that's a great platform to set up. It is the one that I recommend when people want to do a dual podcast, where they are having their solo segments and then the guest feature. That's my most recommended platform to use, for this particular initiative. And it's free to use. And as of this recording, so there's not a time limit in terms of how you can only podcast for this long. you do your pre-records and you upload them. And if you are doing solo segments, so to speak, then again, you can record right into your computer. As long as you have your podcast mic, they give you that option, to do the records. So Brenda Lynn, that is definitely the platform I would be most recommending to jumpstart, with. And yeah, and so let's there was something else. Oh yes. You brought up in terms of if you felt right in the moment and intuitively that you wanted to interview someone and you didn't want to say, well, I'm going to wait, until next season. Well, this is the thing about being able to pre-plan. I normally recommend that people look at this initiative like they are professors at a university, and you would plan out a syllabus of what you want to focus on, but yet you're not so married to it that you can't have some flexibility in terms of other things that you do. But when you do plan out, you can pre-record your guests before the season.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. So
and then fit them in where it works best.
Absolutely. You can be able to, how can I say it? Like, let's say that you have a like if you're alternating in terms of season 1 is just you, and then season 2 is guests, and you alternate, so to speak. Then you can, if you come across someone and you are feeling guided to interview them, then you don't have to feel like, oh no, I'm so stuck, I'm just doing mine, I can't put them in now. Or you could go ahead and pre-interview them and then have it ready for the next season, Also, you don't have to make season 1 of your podcast starting out. You don't have to make that a long season. If you do 3 to 5 mini segments of you, that's good enough. That's good enough. And then you can start bringing in collaborators or start interviewing, individuals. What it is the reason why you do want to have a little bit of more structure around that is because, see, people, once they get a buzz, oh, you've got a podcast, then you have everyone and their grandma, in the sense, that wants to be on the podcast, right? And start to dominate the time and different things like that. So it is good, because remember, we're talking about being in business here.
Right.
So you want this to be very beneficial in terms of who you do bring on. Also, something that you could consider is that when having a dual podcast with guest features, so to speak, the guests can actually be repeat guests. Like, you can have experts that you have come on your podcast. And I've done that too, especially with my celebrity-preneurs, where I would have focuses where they are the experts on that podcast. So I'm not looking to interview tons of people they are either collaborating with me on that podcast, or they have their own segments on that platform. So it does give the diversity for that platform. So again, these are just considerations. So so this has been a great workspace session. And what we'll do is we'll pick back up, Brenda Lynn, with the next session in terms of more nuts and bolts around this, and have you to look at more of the branding aspect, and then we'll move forward from there. How's that sound?
That sounds exciting.
Okay, great. Well, looking forward to the next session, and we will be back with you soon.